Welcome to the Wellness on Purpose podcast, your go-to source for impactful, educational, and realistic information designed to propel you forward on your journey to intentional well-being, not just for today, but for the well-being of future generations. Join us as we dive into insightful conversation with industry and brand leaders in the ever-evolving landscape of the health and wellness industry. Discover the latest trends, gain valuable perspectives, and uncover practical tips to elevate your wellness journey starting today. This podcast is brought to you by Joanne's Place Health Foods, your trusted partner in health, located in the heart of Peterborough and Lindsay, Ontario. I'm your host, Marissa Laughlin, and I'm thrilled to be guiding you through this season of the Wellness on Purpose podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the Wellness on Purpose podcast in 2025. It's your host, Marissa here, and I'm so excited for the upcoming season of our podcast because we have secured some incredible guests to be joining us this year. People from our community, we've got naturopathic doctors, different brands, different acupuncturists, and I'm just so excited to not only learn from other people and other brands, but just be able to also share more personal experiences from our community members and help grow our Peterborough Court Lakes community. So really excited to be here, and I'm looking forward to our guest for today's episode, which is Juliana Dalla Costa. Juliana is a girl who is well into her 20s, really trying to navigate life's uncertainties. And through her journey, what she's really realized is nobody knows what they are doing. And from this, she has actually created her own podcast called Nobody Knows. And I think why it has stuck with me is because I too have faced that all or nothing mindset, and it is something that I still struggle with on a day-to-day basis. So, in this episode, now, I've been following Juliana's journey through social media and through her podcast for some time. And something that really has stuck with me is when she talks about the all or nothing mindset and how having that mindset through the years of her life has really led to a burnout stage. And I know for myself, it's definitely something that I can resonate with. And being somebody who's consulted with a lot of people, I know that a lot of you listening can also resonate with that. So, Juliana is here today to talk about her experience, but also help to share some things that's really supportive for her and some things that really helped her change her mindset to just become a better version of herself. So, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Juliana Dalla Costa onto our podcast today. Hello, Juliana. Welcome to the Wellness on Purpose podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really looking forward to having this big conversation with you about this all or nothing mindset that you have talked a lot about on your own journey. So thank you so much for being here today. To start off, tell us how you are today.
Well, thanks, Marissa. I'm so very, very honored and excited. I feel like it'll be a different way to chat. Like I chat normally with like my audience perfectly fine, but it's just different being interviewed, and I'm really excited to experience this. So thank you so much for having me on. But I'm doing good. I feel like today is a really good day. I have like highs and lows right now. And again, I talk about that all the time online. The past few days have been pretty hard mentally, but like today I woke up and I was like, okay, I have like a little bit of a pep in my step. I went to Pilates and then I got my nails done, which I haven't gotten my nails done in a few months. And that was just such a nice treat. And then I came home and reviewed some of the questions that we're going to talk about today. And I'm just so excited to have a chat with you and talk all about this like all or nothing mindset.
I love it. That sounds like such a great day. For our listeners, we are recording this the second week of February, and it's going to come out in a few weeks when you hear this. But Peterborough are preparing for a very big snowstorm that's coming in a few days. And that is all that I can think about. And I'm trying so hard to kind of pick the pieces of, spring or like the sunshine or something just to kind of not think about the snowstorm so much. So I love that you went and got your nails done. That's like such a fun thing to do. Pilates, just having like the best day that you can, even though, whether it is just like the lack of sunshine, the season, the weather. There's so many things that affect our day to day. So I just love when we can highlight even what we think are more of like the little things, but are actually just like so much bigger for our well-being.
I agree. And like just going off of that little things, I was picking out an outfit today and I decided to opt for my Adidas Sambas, so like their running shoes. And I was like, I'm not going to be able to wear these for the next weekend with this snowstorm. So I was like, I'm going to take this win and it looks good with my outfit and I'm going to wear them today and then I'll have to put them away until there's no more snow, probably, or minimal snow is what we have right now.
Yeah, it's so true. Footwear in the winter is just a whole
I
other
know.
conversation.
Yeah. That could be a whole episode, honestly.
I know. Okay, so today, as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about this all or nothing mindset and how we can let go of that moving through 2025. And I think that a lot of people could probably relate to what I'm about to say, but I think for myself personally, but also in the world of consulting, helping people on their wellness journey, we know that every single decision, every single task, every single habit, every single little to do, thought, process, whatever it might be, it impacts your overall well being. Like we just said, whether it's getting your nails done, going to Pilates, whether it's negative self talk, what we're eating, what we're doing, what we are thinking, it all impacts our well being. And I know for myself, at least, when I establish these healthy daily routines and have something to kind of look forward to in my day, or I have, a different positive mindset or thought process, it overall has a positive impact on my wellness. And then there can also be days where it's the complete opposite, where I am, not feeling myself, or I'm having negative thoughts about my body or my mind or my career, or I'm maybe not feeling as motivated or energized. And that can very quickly put me in this place where I definitely don't want to stay, but also I feel kind of like sluggish and like really down on myself. So I know a lot of people can relate to that, of course, because there's so many things that impact those moods in our day to day and our habits and things like that. And that's really what I want to talk to you about today. I've been following your journey on your podcast and following you on socials, and you talk a lot about how life changes and there are big things that we have to go through. And it's not just milestones. Like I know people think, kids, marriage, finding the dream job, all of those big things, but they're everything that we're going through that changes. And as I said, part of your journey that I've been following on your social platforms and on your podcast, and it's really, really stuck with me, is this all or nothing mindset. So that's what I want to talk to you about today on this podcast and share with our listeners who really might resonate with this all or nothing mindset and how we can kind of have a better relationship with it. So let's start by talking about what led you to have this, we'll say, unrealistic belief, well, in quotations, of a mindset of all or nothing. Do you think that for you and having this all or nothing mindset in things that you do, whether it's like your day to day or your career, do you think this stemmed from something? Do you think this was like climbing the corporate ladder, childhood trauma, expectations of your own self? Like, where does your journey of this begin?
Yeah, for sure. And I really appreciate this question. I think it's a really good internal reflection for me to do because I don't do it too often. I'm sort of just, I think everyone does this. We live our lives and we don't often set aside time to do internal reflection, be like, oh, well, how did I actually get here? And I think understanding how we have gotten here will help us to change our paths or maybe change some of those, I say, quote unquote, bad habits or bad behaviors that we maybe don't really like or are not conducive to the relationships that we have in life or whatever. And for me, there's a lot to unpack here. I could, again, have a whole episode just about this one question. So I'll give you like the Reader's Digest version. But I was conditioned, I think, from a very young age to have this like all or nothing mindset. I was either a success or a failure. My performance was either perfect or not so good, terrible. It wasn't, if I wasn't like 100%, then I was, let's say, zero. And this mindset came from both like direct language, so messages of you can't quit or don't give up or you're a good girl. And then also indirect language of, being iced out if maybe I made a mistake, being punished or made fun of for expressing my emotions. And like a multitude of experiences have contributed to this. What I'm about to talk about is not like the end all be all of why I'm this way, but I do think it's a really big thing that has shaped me, and that I grew up an only child of a very like high conflict divorce. And for people that are listening that have been through divorce, either if they are in a marriage and now they're divorcing, or if they are also a child of divorce, it's a chaotic mess. Like, tip my hat to anyone that's going through that because it's just so difficult. There's so many emotions. It can be so volatile. And so when I say high conflict, of course, there's so many varying degrees. Some people really make it out alive and really well through their divorce or whatever, and some people don't. And me and my family, we struggled for a bit. I'm not gonna lie. Like, the high conflict I'm talking about is my schedule between my mom and my dad's was planned out up until I was 18. And like, of course, as I got a little bit closer to 18, I'm sure there was some wiggle room for me to like say, oh no, I'm gonna stay at my mom's or I'm gonna stay at my dad's tonight. But like, I was just so conditioned at that point to just be like, no, this is the schedule and we're not changing it. And I was very seldomly allowed, like I said, to stray from that schedule because also there was like the underlining message if I did stray from the schedule, I was taking time away from that parent. And that also made me feel super guilty and like really bad and sad inside. And so the hostility between my parents, it was just always there. So you have to imagine that I never really understood neutrality or just being calm or not feeling that guilt if I decided to make a different decision. And again, just to really reiterate how high conflict this divorce was, like my parents couldn't stand to be in the same room. Like if they could avoid being in the same room, they would, and they would like go out of their way to do that. I think like the time I reflect on fondly, but also was like just a mind blown out of body experience was for my university graduation. They were for the first time carpooling in the same car to go to Toronto together with me in there as well, and my stepmom, which I think was a bit of a mediator at the time. And they had to be together because I think I only had 2 tickets to the actual graduation. So they just had to like suck it up and be together. And it actually ended up going off really well. But that's just to show you, I would have been 22 at the time. And they divorced when I was about 2 years old. So that's 20 years of just this high hostile environment um, that was just so incredibly difficult to navigate, especially as a child and especially when I was doing it on my own. I do have step siblings, but they weren't involved in that exact experience. So it was just kind of me. And I've gone to like extensive therapy on this. I have worked through this and I'm now on the other side of it where I can give my parents grace. I had a lot of like resentment and anger as a kid growing up, and they definitely got the brunt of it too. But the reality is, as much as my parents tried not to, I think any parent, they're going to pass on trauma to their kids. Like, it's not a bad thing, it's kind of inevitable. And I don't hold that against my parents at all. I know they did their best with the tools and resources that they had at their disposal, but I also have to be aware that a lot of that has shaped me into who I am today. And it's not their responsibility to fix, it's only my sole responsibility to fix. Also, if I so choose to want to fix it. I have noticed in the past few years that I've done therapy, I do want to fix it. And I do have some tendencies that are not so great and have really put a damper on my current relationships and just how I go about life. And the biggest thing is this all or nothing mindset. And it really, at the end of the day, just hurts me and harms me the most. So that is something I'm actively trying to change. And that's why I like post on it on socials all the time because it is a work in progress, but I think a lot of people can resonate with it. And I think if you really want to put in the work, you can change that habit and that behavior and that mindset. So that was a very long-winded way of just explaining all of that. But again, I could go on and on about it, but that really is like the crux of how I've sort of come to this realization that I had that mindset.
I think it's so interesting when we go that deep, which thank you so much for sharing. But when we talk about childhood, and I feel like our generation is really learning now about the impacts of how we grew up, and it's changed so much from like when we were, 5, 6, 7, how even
Yeah.
through like grade school versus how it is now, where like people our age are now having children and
Yeah.
all of those things are changing, which is really great. But I think it's also so important to remember, and you said it, was our parents did the best they could with the tools that they had because there was no such thing as therapy. There was like these were just taboo things that, like, even when I bring up to my family, they were like, that was never a thing that we had resources to or talked about. So I think it's so important that we are working through those things, identifying things that happened so early on in our life, and then having the tools to fix it because the generation older than us, like our parent generation, they didn't have the option to correct that pathway for themselves. Although we see it now, like I feel like our generation is that now teaching our parents, actually, no, this is more normal, or this
Yeah.
is more supportive or healthy, or this is a boundary. And I see it and it's good. It's a good thing and it's a good shift. Yeah, I think the fact of, strict regiments from childhood, right from the get-go, is what's showing up in people who are, I don't want to say overachievers, but trying to be overachievers or trying to have everything perfect or being all or nothing. When you go from childhood, you go through university, like I'm sure through university, you probably had like still a lot of that structure in your day to day. Maybe you had a little bit of like off the rails type of energy as
Yeah.
well. But when you move into being an adult, did
Mhm.
you know that you were still having those high expectations, all or nothing mindset? And do you feel like it still kind of worked through your day-to-day routine as you started to develop as an adult and have a career and relationships and things? Like, did you see that continue?
Yes, totally. And I literally have not come to this realization that I have this, like, which is like, if you do think about it, yes, it's very young in the grand scheme of things, but at the same time, that's a very long time to go throughout your life of living that way. So, yes, there are a lot of things that I've realized and that have contributed to me acknowledging that or realizing it, but it's definitely taken some time to get there. You'll figure it out when you figure it out, and it's never too late to figure it out. But I am grateful that it is in my 20s still that I've come to this realization because now I have the rest of my life to like work to actively change that.
For sure. And do you think that there was like a specific moment in your life, whether it be like career, whether it be personal, like your relationships, whatever that may be, that you were like, whoa, this is actually a very unrealistic way of, moving through what I want my life to be, and I need to make a change. Like, could you kind of pinpoint when that was for you?
Yeah, for sure. So I was burnt out in 2023. So that would be a couple years into like my, I guess, my corporate big girl career. And I work in marketing and I worked for an agency. And like, if anyone's ever worked at an agency before, it is definitely an all or nothing mindset. And it's great when you're young because you get so much experience. Like, I will always advocate if you want to learn a lot, go to an agency because you're going to learn all the different dynamics. You're going to have to multitask out the yin yang. You're going to have to do so much work, but you're also going to learn so much. And there's so many people that will root you on and cheer for you and champion you. It's just a lot of work. And I think I blended in or fit in so well there because of course I had this all or nothing mindset. I had been doing it for 20 years. And this was just after COVID and it was still remote work. Our company had fully moved remote, which I thought, this is great. I get to work from home. I can take my lunch whenever. No one's like really checking in on me. It just felt like so much freedom. And there's so many pros and cons of working from home. And I think I'm a really big advocate for working from home, but I did not know how to set personal boundaries. I didn't understand what a work-life balance was. And especially when you're working from home, like it's your work and your life and your personal life are totally enmeshed. So you really need to have good boundaries there. So I was working past 5 o'clock, checking my computer, leaving my laptop on and like going to like a yoga Pilates class, coming back and then doing 3 more hours of work. So I really wouldn't like shut down both my computer and my mind figuratively until like 10 o'clock at night. And then I would like be on my phone scrolling on socials. My like diet was poor. I was like ordering Uber Eats and takeout all the time. I wasn't like cooking proper, nutritious, good hearty meals for myself. I was barely drinking water. I think I went a full several months of just starting my day off with an iced coffee. and then not eating until like noon or sometimes 2 p.m. because I wouldn't take lunch. Like my habits were just horrendous. And I don't blame myself because I was just kind of thrown in there. I was like, I'm gonna do whatever I can to like work hard, let other people know that I'm working hard, like get that praise. That again, that whole all or nothing mindset until I started having terrible like breakdowns at work. I'd be crying at my desk. Like I remember my partner Brendan, we'd see each other at 9 o'clock in the morning. I'd hop on my meetings and then he'd come up around like 11 o'clock and I'd be in tears. And he'd be like, "What's wrong? Like, are you okay?" And I would be so upset because my whole identity was involved in my work because I didn't really do anything except work and then just go on social. So whenever something was terrible at work, my whole mood reflected that. And my whole identity was tied into the ups and downs of my workday. And so I started having these terrible breakdowns, very anxiety fueled, and I don't blame myself again because all I was drinking was coffee. So not hard to do. And it got to a point where Brennan said to me, I think maybe we should reach back out to like your therapist. And of course, this therapist has been with me, like I mentioned, since I was young, going through the whole divorce with my parents and stuff. And I've seen her on and off my entire life. And so I reached out to her and she was like, Juliana, this is starting to sound a little bit like burnout. You're just running your body ragged, and this is not the first time you've done this in your life. If you could divide your life up into chunks, like when you were a child, extracurriculars all the time, university, straight A's, grinding it out, seeing your friends, having a social life, not really resting. Like, when was the last time you've ever rested intentionally? And I couldn't answer that because I was like, I've never done that in my life. So this was like the biggest turning point when I like physically could not do my work. I was rolling out of bed 2 minutes before I had to hop onto a meeting. Didn't take care of myself. My hygiene was a mess, was not eating properly. I was just a shell of a human. And I couldn't mentally or physically function. And so at that point, I was like, okay, I think I need to take a break from work, which was such a like, we don't do that with an all or nothing mindset. Hello. That's like never been done before. And I had a lot of shame about that. And I had to like obviously work through that with therapy, but I ended up doing it. And it was supposed to be just for 4 weeks, which if anyone's ever taken like a mental health leave or a leave of absence from work and you're burnt out, 4 weeks is probably not enough. You have to think about all of the compounded years of you being burnt out and you're going to take 4 weeks. Like that just doesn't add up. The scales are not balanced there. So I just started with off with 4 weeks though, because I could not imagine taking more than a month off from work. Like, who do I think I am? And I did that. And then the grand scheme of things, it ended up being 3 months that I took off because I talked with my family doctor and then my therapist, and we kept pushing it out because I was not mentally ready to return. And so that was like the biggest moment in my life that one, I gave myself like permission to rest. I'm gonna get like a little bit emotional just because it's so weird to say that or like give myself grace because I've never given myself grace when I'm like it's either black or white or like you succeed or you fail, right? And so to be like, oh no, I can still succeed, but I'm gonna take a break right now, a rest right now. That is such a weird thing to say. So yeah, it took me like 3 months and I went back, and honestly, looking back on it, I probably should have taken longer. But just that burnout experience of navigating burnout, accepting that I had burnout, like vocally claiming I'm burnt out and I need help, really humbled me and my ego. And it was honestly for the best because now I am not completely different, but I'm just way more mindful of that. And I will never do that again to myself. As much as I still practice some of those tendencies that are not so great, I will do anything in my power to not get back to where I was before I took that leave of absence.
Wow, so many things I could touch on there. Like, thank you for sharing all of that, first and foremost. But I think anyone who's listening right now and can relate to this is an A-type person. And they are thinking, whoa, 4 weeks. I could never, just as what you said. But realistically, like you said, you have to think about the amount of time that you've compacted in your life in that fight or flight overdrive. And there's no science behind what I'm about to say, but in my head, a month is like a weekend to how much you have like dedicated to somebody else's business or pleasing other people or whatever that might be. Also, I think it's important, which kind of leads me to my next question. It's probably important to talk about is like in those first few weeks of taking a leave from whatever that might be, work, relationship, whatever that might be, you need time, first of all, to even come to realization that you are allowed to be in that space and rest and recover. It's not like you're jumping into the healing right away or like jumping into like replenishing your body or your adrenals. It's not like day in and day out. Like that transition will probably take 4 weeks before you even think, okay, what am I now ready to even add back to my schedule? Is it a fitness class? Is it just a walk? Is it an alarm? Like it could take 4 weeks to even make that first step. So for you, when you were starting that journey of healing and trying to find that stability in the expectations and goals you had for yourself, and also what you wanted next or what you didn't want in terms of like this all or nothing mindset. What was the first big change that you made to your day-to-day routine that was supportive for you?
Well, it's funny because I think it was a Monday, or it was either the beginning of the week or the end of the week that I like told my manager and like HR, hey, I gave them the doctor's note. I was like, I'm gonna take 4 weeks. And they're like, no problem. They were so great. Like, no problem. Like, turn your laptop off. You don't even have to worry about anything. The bare minimum is if you can just give us like sort of bullet notes on like where you're at with clients or like what the work that you're doing, just so we can take it off from you and keep it moving. That would be great, but also no pressure if you don't have the bandwidth to do that. So they were amazing. And so I logged off. And the other thing I was battling with was like getting a leave of absence approval from my benefits provider, because that was a really big thing for me too of if I'm going to do this, finances. Like, let's be realistic. I am was what, 27 at the time, 28 at the time. I don't have a lot of like disposable income, right? Yes, of course, I live with my partner now, and I am so grateful for him because he is a really big factor in why I even allow myself to take a break. If I was single at the time, and this was a few years earlier, I probably would not have even allowed myself to take the break because I would have been like, I can't afford it. So I still advocated with my benefits provider to try and get a leave of absence approval. It ended up going through. This was also a pretty quick process, but that ended up also being part of my demise of like not being able to actually take a break. And I think this is a much larger issue of just mental health in general, of we there's so many things that people praise, and a lot of companies, oh, we advocate for mental health and we prioritize it, and it is a serious issue. But then when it comes down to actually accepting people as they are and honoring their mental health and supporting them when they're really struggling, it's not really the same conversation or the same talk that they claim to walk. So that was really difficult, and I had a lot of high tension, I guess, conversations that did not allow me to rest. And I always stressed about having those meetings with the benefits provider because, oh, well, do they actually believe that I'm unwell? I even remember to this day, the first conversation I had with them was, I'm mentally burnt out. I cannot do my job. I can barely get out of bed. The only saving grace I have right now is going to a yoga class because it helps me turn my mind off the meditation and mindfulness from a yoga class, as well as getting myself out of the house, which technically is my office, that gets me, keeps me going every single day. And the benefits provider said, oh, well, if you can go to a yoga class, then you can go to work. And it just was such a moment that crushed me as someone who is in this all or nothing mindset and is actively trying to stand up for herself and say, hey, I need a break. I'm struggling right now mentally. You can't see it, but I literally can't deal right now. The only thing I can deal with is going to a yoga class. But that was just such a moment of dismissal. And the whole cycle of me considering to take the mental health leave just started right at the beginning again. And this was probably about a week or 2 weeks into my mental health leave or my leave of absence. And so I was back at the very start. I was defeated, really frustrated. I was angry. And so I had to, all that work that I had been trying to rest for that week and a half, 2 weeks went out the door because I just felt like, oh, well, I don't deserve this. That benefits provider told me I don't deserve this. I should be back at work. Someone who actually is struggling with their mental health, physically, whatever it is, deserves a break more than I do. So it was just so defeating, and it took a really long time. It actually took me the 4 weeks to even start to rest.
Quick pause in today's episode because I want to talk to you about a transformational online program. In case you missed it, Joanne's Place released an online program called the Wellness on Purpose Program to Educate You last year. And our intention with this program is to make this education more accessible for our community to better support their wellness journeys. This program promotes sustainable and realistic changes, and it really focuses on the foundational pillars of every single person's health: your nutrition, your sleep, your stress, and also movement. If you want to get started today, click the link in the description below to learn more about the Wellness on Purpose program. By the way, it's completely free and you can move at your own pace from the comfort of your own home. Now let's get back to the episode. So, when you were, we'll say you're past the 4 weeks at this stage
Yeah.
and you're maybe more in a clearer mindset where you're thinking, what can I do to support myself? Out of all of the healing tools that you had available or that you were thinking or considering, and even like beyond that 4 weeks, even up to like now, what would you say in your day to day or week to week is so impactful to you? It's non-negotiable and it is really supporting you along your journey.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, therapy. I mean, I'm a therapy girl through and through. Like, obviously, as I mentioned, I started therapy from a very young age, and most of it has been like talk therapy. When I was younger, I think I went to art therapy, and currently, right now, I'm trying CBT, so cognitive behavioral therapy, which is very scary because you essentially have to like expose yourself to what's causing the stress or the anxiety, and that's really scary. Like, of course. So I'm getting used to that type of therapy. But therapy has just really allowed me to give myself the grace to do whatever I need to do, but I'm just too scared to do it, or I just can't even imagine that that's possible. So, therapy for sure. I would say the therapy has shown me how to give myself grace of like, what would it look like today if I didn't push myself? Words that I would never imagine I would say like a few years ago. Or I'm still a good person even if I don't excel. Like, wow, I would have never thought that again a few years ago. Some days I also still don't think that, but I have to remind myself that. Other things is like moving my body. I think going through all of this stress, I'm way more in tune, or at least more aware of my body and how taking care of myself helps me do things like getting a good night's sleep. I am an absolute bear now if I don't get a good night's sleep. I am also really grumpy or just really mentally jammed up if I don't move my body. And I mean, like going for a walk or just going to yoga or like Pilates. I really try to not say like exercise anymore because that just feels like a chore. And it just, in my head, it's like, oh God, I gotta go to the gym. And like, I don't really like doing that. Whereas like moving my body, going to yoga. At least I get some of that mindfulness in there. That's really enjoyable. And I've also started going to this Pilates studio where I'm not really originally from here. So I've started to meet some friends or acquaintances there. And it's nice to just chat with them about their day and what's going on in their life. And then lastly, which was tied into yoga and Pilates, is like the meditation and mindfulness. I actually did this like several years ago before I was burnt out, and I really, really enjoyed it. But then for whatever reason, I stopped it. But the meditation helps me like figure out what's going on in my body, like maybe where I'm feeling the stress or the tension, accepting it. Like I was talking about with the giving myself grace of being like, okay, I feel really anxious today. That's neither bad nor good. It's like neutral. I'm just gonna like let it stay there, but I can still move throughout my day and do the things I have to do. Or if it's uncomfortable too much, I'm just gonna rest today, or maybe I won't go to yoga and Pilates, or maybe I will ask my friends to reschedule dinner because it's just too much for me today. Just to like shifting my mindset of like it's okay to change your mind or like try different things out versus like no, you have to do it. You committed, you have to do it. If you don't, you're a bad person. Like those type of ultimatums. Those I feel like are the main tools and like resources that have really helped me over the past few years.
I think all of those things are so realistic for people who are listening as well too. Like I don't feel like any of those things that you've experienced but also could help with someone else. It's not a stretch, I would say, because you gave a few options, but also I love that you talked about you could have a plan for the day and then wake up and be like, actually, this isn't it, and that's okay. Like that is huge because especially fitness can see that. I also like that you change it to movement. Like when we talk
Yeah.
about moving the body, that could also be something that we know is so, I have to do this date, this. It is this structure where it's, I don't want to miss a day or whatever that might be, but giving yourself grace to be like, okay, today I'm going to go to a Pilates studio. Today just going to go for a walk.
Mhm.
Today maybe I'm going to sit on the couch and rest in another way, or I'm going to meditate, whatever that might be. So I love that. I think those are all very supportive, not just to what we're talking about today, but just overall well-being, which is really great. Now you kind of touched on where you are at with being comfortable and like having those maybe inner dialogues with yourself to be like, oh no, let's change the conversation that my mind is having and move forward. So when we talk about that, how are you, if you are, how do you measure your success at this point?
Yeah. That's a really good question. And I actually had to think about this one for a while because I think also the term success is kind of like a trigger word for me because I'm so used to that's the goal. Success is the goal, and I'm going to do whatever I can to be successful. And if I'm not successful, like I don't even want to think about that option. Like I'm just like a zero, as I said. I think about it a lot more now. It's very abstract and it's more emotionally driven versus being like quantifiable, as I said, and very black and white of I hit this milestone, I'm successful. And when I first went back to work after being burnt out, I was very aware of like falling back into that all or nothing mindset. And my therapist even said, you're going to want to do exactly what you did before you left and sometimes you actually might do exactly what you did before you left, and that's okay because it's hard to change the behavior. You're going to fall back into those patterns, but the biggest thing is being mindful of when you do that to slightly shift some of that behavior or just draw your attention elsewhere and get back onto the path that you've been working at, or the path that I was working at when I was on my leave of absence, of just being a little bit more easier on myself. And that, again, that just makes total sense of why I would want to go back to the way I was. I've been doing it for almost like 30 years. So just having that understanding of I'm gonna screw up, but when I do screw up, it's not a bad thing. It's just human behavior, and I'm going to redirect myself back to the habits and new behaviors I've learned. And my therapist actually gave me a challenge when I went back to work, and she was like, I want you to operate at 70%, not 100. And I was like, you're kidding, right? I couldn't even again fathom, even after doing some of that internal work of being burnt out and off and understanding that's not always great. Like I was like, that is going to be so uncomfortable. How am I not going to like react to just jumping on the bandwagon of, oh, I can do this, or let me help this, or getting that praise of Juliana did such a good job at work today from other people, right? So she was like, just do what you think would be 70%. If you have like a laundry list of things to do, if it's you have to count out like 10 things, just do seven of them. And she said also, if people are asking for help and you will have set in your agenda the seven things that you have to do, you can't help because you're only operating at 70%. So that exercise was really challenging, but it showed me that, okay, I'm only going to do 70%, but oh my God, like I didn't get fired. Like, I'm still getting praise. People still like me as a human being. I'm not a terrible person because I said, oh no, I can't do that today. Right? Like that really showed me that the all or nothing mindset is complete garbage, even though I know so many people struggle with it. But like, you will survive if you don't do all or nothing.
I think that's a huge, huge takeaway that everybody can take from this because there's also something to be said about working at 100% not efficiently and then working efficiently at 70%. Like
Totally.
I know for myself, if I can stick to what is on my list and not add throughout the day, I mean, there's going to be exceptions, but if I can have that strict boundary, I can work so much more efficiently, time-wise, but also like creatively working better with others when I don't have this pressure of like having to check off 20 things on a list in a day. So That is huge. But also, how do you go from working at 100% pace to 70? It is really a retraining of the brain and communicating. I think it's really important to communicate whether we're talking work, like communicating with your boss, or it's your relationship, communicating with your partner to be like, look, I am only at 70% today. So like, please don't press my buttons, please. Like, let's, or it's like your girlfriends, where like, you know what? Can we reschedule? And so many people are, I think, on the same page about understanding where the limits are and valuing the friendships that appreciate you being like, hey, look, you take the time you need, I'll meet with you next week or whatever that might be. So I love that for the people that are working on themselves and working to have better work-life balance, better relationships and things like that. And I think you're right. Like success is no longer crossing the finish line because one, that finish line seems to get farther and farther away. And two, you could have had the worst run at getting to that finish line and feeling so depleted at the end that you're not even celebrating what you're winning. Whereas if you can finish and be like, wow, my mental health is great, my body is a temple, I feel happy when I wake up. I'm waking up with energy. It's a feeling versus like getting to that point.
Totally. Or even tying into this metaphor of like, even thinking you want to run the race, like that in and of itself could be a success. Of like, let's say you've never run before in your life and you've just started doing runs on the treadmill at the gym, or you're actually just going outside and doing a run and you're working on your form and you're like, hey, I feel like I've done this for a few weeks, however long. I would love to see what it would look like to run a marathon or however, whatever distance you want to run. Like that in and of itself, think about where you were before you even started running. Like you probably would have never imagined that you could do that. Like that is should be celebrated in and of itself before even getting across the finish line.
I couldn't agree more. Absolutely. I asked you kind of already about tools of your journey and helping with the healing process and getting to where you're at now. But I also love to talk about more like products. I know myself, working at Joanne's Place, but also being somebody who tries a lot of different things. I am like a big ingredient and review reader from other people using different products because there's so many things out there. There's also lots of fad products out there. So I would love to know, like, if there's anything that you use on a day-to-day basis that has been really supportive for just your general overall health. And it could be anything from like food, supplements, skincare, whatever you like, where you're like, every time you run out of it, you're going to replenish it.
Yeah. Well, again, I could have a whole episode just to talk about this because I love like beauty and skincare and hair care and just I love shopping and I love browsing too. Brendan is always, I have to get him at the right day because he does not like just browsing. He has ADHD, so it's really hard for him to just focus on one thing and just like hang out in a store for half an hour. He's like, I want to get in and I want to get out. So on the days where he is like, yeah, sure, okay, I'll come with you because he knows I'm going to browse. I just love it. It's so fun to like check out new products, talk with like people who are also passionate, maybe sometimes like customers are also like sales associates. Like I just love chatting about beauty and skincare and all that good stuff. But when I first took my leave of absence, the first week I actually fell down with a cold, which makes sense because my body was probably just so high strung, so much stress, anxiety that when I finally shut my laptop down in the first day of just being like, oh, I have nothing to do today, my body was like, I am out. Peace out. I'm gonna like just crumble. And I did. I had the worst cold of my life. I guess in a way it was kind of cathartic and like very cleansing because I felt like I was getting all the gunk out of my body. Actually, like my body was repulsing all the stress and anxiety I had. And I love Beekeeper's Naturals. I will take like regular lozenges or whatever, like if I have to, but I just like the idea that it's natural. It's obviously derived from honey, save the bees. But like the throat spray was amazing. I love that throat spray. And I actually used that throat spray years and years ago when I was probably like in my early teens. I did like singing lessons, and my singing teacher, when I was coming down with the cold, she was like, you should get this throat spray with propolis. It's really good to like just coat your throat when it's really scratchy or dry. And then however many years later, cut to, I refound the throat spray, the specific one from Beekeepers Naturals, and I love it. Like I use it obviously when I'm sick or have a scratchy throat, but I will also use it now when it's like winter and it's dry. As well as like obviously the effects from propolis are really good for your immune system, but I'm obsessed with it. And I've also gotten Brendan obsessed with it now too.
Any of our OG listeners, I think, will probably giggle right now because I have talked about that product on this podcast
So
so
good.
much. It's my number one repurchased health and wellness
Yeah.
product because it, like no other. I have been using that product like every week, like on rotation for probably the last like 10 years. It honestly is one of the best products for like sore throat, prevention, strep
Yeah.
throat. I love it.
It's the best. And that's what I was just about to say is that last time I was sick, I went to go grab it from the closet and there was none left. And I was like, Brendan, the one rule is if you're going to use it all, you have to replenish it. So we got more, but it's just like that's how quickly it goes in our household.
Yeah.
So I really do enjoy that one. Another one that I'm actually drinking right now, it's the spearmint tea, and I can only get it from the traditional medicinals brand.
Yep.
Twinings, all the other tea brands. I can't get my hands on spearmint tea. But I love it because I've dealt with my skin issues. I've had acne on and off for like all of my 20s. Um, Spearmint tea does help reduce inflammation. So if you do deal with a lot of cystic acne, it can help that a lot, help reduce that inflammation, that redness, as well as I've used it because, like I said, I love having iced coffee first thing in the morning. I'm trying to wean myself off of that and have tea instead. I think when I have tea and like a solid breakfast, then I have my coffee. I'm a way better person in my anxiety. I like don't have anxiety when I have my breakfast that way. And when I do have coffee on an empty stomach, it's like through the roof, obviously. So I really, really love spearmint tea. I also just have it, I think in the winter time, it's just so nice to have a warm cup of tea. But I'm pretty sure it's caffeine free, so I can have it at night too, like when I'm getting all cozy and warm before I go to bed. And I just love a good cup of tea, and spearmint's like so yummy. I've had spearmint and then I've had peppermint. And for whatever reason, peppermint is just not my jam anymore because spearmint's like so much sweeter in a way,
Yeah.
and less of it.
I'm also a big spearmint fan as well. And that's exactly it, is it gives you like a little bit of sweetness without too much cool. But yeah, all great points on spearmint. I love it. Well, thank you for sharing your top two products with us. So I would love to know, and I know our listeners would love to know, if there was one thing and one thing only that you could share with our listeners that really resonate with this all or nothing mindset, or even tell your younger self, what is the one thing that you would say?
Um, well, I think I alluded to it a little bit, but I think it's just being aware. I think this applies to anything in life. If you're aware of like a bad habit or something that you're actively trying to change or just your life situation, if you're aware of it, then you can start to change it or alter it or fix it or go about rectifying it however way you see fit, but like you have to start with being aware. And if you're not there yet, that's totally fine. Like I think people come to that recognition or that realization on their own time, and everyone has a different journey. But once you hit that realization, then I think the rest of everything else falls into place of actually actively trying to change it. And I think also not judging or shaming yourself. There's a long journey ahead once you hit that realization of, oh, I'm not really happy with this and I want to change it. And especially if you're realizing this at like 50 or 60 years old, like think about how many years you've had this, like if we're referring to the all or nothing mindset, for example, think of how long you've thought about life in extremes. You have to be kind to yourself and give yourself grace and realize that the way that you have seen the world is not necessarily bad or good. It's neutral inherently. That's just how you've gone about life, and you've in a way protected yourself. That's how you've protected yourself from things that you think might be a threat to you. So that's just your body's way of protecting you. So you have to just give yourself grace of how you've gotten through life. And then if you're actively trying to change it, then slowly but surely you'll get there. But you're only going to get there by saying, I'm okay, or like, I give myself permission to make mistakes as I go through this journey, or I'm going to mess up and that's totally okay. Just that non-shaming mindset too is really going to help you get through it as well as make that progress. Because again, in a way, if you think about it, shaming yourself is tying into that all or nothing mindset. Like you're a bad person or you're a failure because you didn't do something. That's just emphasizing everything you're actively trying to change. And I also think that our brains are miraculous and powerful things, but popular to contrary belief, they're not always right. And your feelings are so valid, and how you're feeling and is incredibly valid, but it might not necessarily be true. So accepting our thoughts as the truth definitely skews our perspective, and it can lead to poor interpretations of different situations that we go about in life. So I just think allowing myself to do the actual opposite of what my brain might be telling me to, or my anxiety might be telling me to. So like giving me that permission to rest. That has done me wonders versus saying you can't rest today because you have X, Y, and Z commitments and you can't fail at that. The rest has been wonders, and just doing the complete opposite of what my brain is telling me to do has, in a weird way, worked out and really helped. That was a very long-winded way of answering that question.
But very important points. And I think it's really important to touch on them and reiterate them because we tell ourselves different narratives every single day, and it's not always true. Actually, a lot of the time it's not true. So it's important to be mindful, recognize, and be open to just changing the path or the routine or whatever that might be to feel better about yourself or feel better about whatever you're working on. So thank you so much for sharing about your journey. It's been really, really enlightening to know that you have been at such a place where so many things felt like they were stagnant, and that you're now on this podcast and your own podcast talking about the other side and like how you're still working through that, but like you are seeing such pivotal changes. And I think a lot of people listening will really benefit from your story and also your suggestions and what you've worked through. So thank you so much for sharing that. I appreciate it. And I know our listeners are going to appreciate it as well. So for our listeners, I would love for you to tell them where they can find you, social, your podcast, website. Where can people hear more from you?
Yeah, of course. Well, I just want to say thanks so much for that acknowledgement. It really means a lot. Like to even hear you say you've made it through the other side, like that for me, I'm still grappling with that. And you're so right too. It's like a never-ending journey. So I know I got years and years ahead of me, and things are probably going to re-trigger me, but it is nice to just hear someone else say congrats or like you're doing a really great job. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. That means a lot. But if you're interested in hearing more of me like rambling on and talking about my life, then if you're interested in tuning into another podcast, then I host Nobody Knows podcast, and it's dedicated to those that are figuring out their life. And spoiler alert, I think it doesn't matter what age you are, you're always going to be figuring out life because realistically, nobody knows what they're doing. And we talk about wellness, relationships, personal growth, finances, and we also have guests on there from time to time to like offer a different perspective, and also so we don't hear myself rambling all the time. But you can find that on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, as well as YouTube. And then if you are on socials, you can find me at Nobody Knows Podcast on Instagram. And then if you're also on TikTok, it's at Nobody Knows Podcast and followed by an underscore. So yeah.
Amazing. I will put all of those links in the description below for our listeners as well, and they can find you there. I want to thank you so, so much. Honestly, this has been such an amazing podcast to start off our season, and I'm grateful for you sharing your story and talking through the hard conversations and sharing that on here and then also on your podcast. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thanks so much, Marissa, and thanks to anyone who's listening to this. Just keep the faith. You will get through it. Realizing you want to change is the first step, and I know everyone will get there in their own time. So, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us for another insightful episode of the Wellness on Purpose podcast. We hope you found the information valuable and inspiring to support you along your wellness journey. Before we go, a quick reminder. The content shared in this podcast is for educational purposes only. While we strive to provide accurate and up-to-date information, it's important to remember that everyone's health journey is unique. We strongly recommend consulting with your healthcare professional or a qualified health practitioner for personalized advice tailored to your specific needs and circumstances. Your well-being is a priority, and speaking to a healthcare professional ensures that you receive guidance that best aligns with your individualized health goals. If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes, please reach out to us through our website. That's all for now. I hope you stay well, stay informed, and remember, your health is your greatest wealth. Until next time, take care.